بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الهداة المهديين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We mentioned the last few nights that taqwa, spiritual immunity, and the ability to stay away from haram and protect ourselves from the temptations of the dunya and desire can be attained through two ways. Number one, we said the fear factor, the fear from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-khawfu min Allah. This is a factor that can teach us and lead us to taqwa. And number two, we spoke about this last night, is by developing basira, the sight of the heart. When one develops basira, they are able to protect themselves from the spiritual impurities of this life in a much easier way. Now the Holy Quran, in the verse that we began our lectures with, when we spoke about the virtue of fasting, the Holy Quran says that one of the most important tools and mechanisms that help us in attaining taqwa is fasting. Siyam. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum. O you who believe, fasting has been prescribed upon you just like it was prescribed upon nations before you. So Allah says that you have to fast the month of Ramadan. And then Allah Azza wa Jal tells us the philosophy, the reason, the goal behind legislating Siyam, fasting. Allah says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may learn piety, taqwa, and we already explained what taqwa means, and what taqwa is, and what constitutes taqwa, and the different examples. So Allah says that fast so that you may achieve taqwa, meaning fast so that you can stay away from haram. Fast so that you can guard yourself and protect yourself from sins, spiritual viruses, through taqwa. So the Holy Quran clearly shows us that the main goal behind fasting is to achieve taqwa. Now the question is, how does fasting help us in achieving taqwa? There are two factors, two elements, or two virtues that fasting cultivates. And through these two virtues and elements, we learn taqwa. And listen carefully, brothers and sisters, this is something that's very important. And through this, we can learn that fasting isn't always an end. Yes, it pleases Allah, it's a wajib, but it's also a means to a greater end. So when we fast during the month of Ramadan, I shouldn't consider myself as I have accomplished my goal, because alhamdulillah I didn't eat or drink from Fajr until Maghrib, khalas. No, that's only part of it. The way that one can truly measure his success in the month of Ramadan and fasting is to see if that helped you in attaining taqwa. If Ramadan fasting did not increase your spiritual immunity from haram, then you really didn't gain much from fasting. So what are those two elements or virtues that fasting help us in cultivating and developing, and at the end of the day it leads to taqwa? We'll speak about one tonight and the second one tomorrow night. Number one of the main elements, my dear brothers and sisters, and virtues that we need in order to practice taqwa, to learn taqwa, to become someone that is a muttaqi, someone like Prophet Yusuf, like Imam Ali alayhi salam, is willpower. See, willpower is very important. And the reason why we human beings need strong willpower is because there are conflicting elements within us. There are conflicting desires within us. And because there is this conflict and each element wants to take us towards a different direction, we have to have a strong will so that we are able to choose what is right and better for us. And this isn't just a law in Islam, in religion. This is a law to be successful in anything in life. Let me give you an example with health. Let's say you go to your doctor before the month of Ramadan, and your doctor does all the checkups that are necessary, the blood work and whatnot. And your doctor tells you your cholesterol is high, and this could lead to so many problems, and you could become sick with all these chronic illnesses. So you tell him, what do I do in addition to the medication? He says, you have to cut back on the food. You're eating too much food. No sugars. Cut down on carbs, carbohydrates, in order for you to what? To stay healthy, lose weight? To stay healthy. So you realize now that this is important, detrimental to your health. If you want to live a long life, a healthy life, you have to cut back on food. So you say, okay, inshallah. Then Ramadan begins one night. You are visiting a friend in the Diwaniyah. And all of a sudden they bring out to you, the kindness, the generosity of hospitality in Ramadan. They bring out to you a plate with a very, very good looking chocolate cake. And it's topped with caramel, and it's topped with whipping cream, and all these other things that are filled with sugar and they're not healthy with us. Right? Or they bring you the kanafa, I don't know what you like here, what's the best example. And it's filled with sugar. Now when you look at that cake and you really crave it, there is an internal war that happens inside you. A struggle. From one side, you have your impulsive brain, your desires. What do they tell you? It's like the shaitan whispering, eat it, it's good. Look at how the chocolate is so juicy. Look at the different layers, it's so soft. You're going to feel so pressured to eat that cake or kanafa or whatever you may like. This is your desires pulling you towards eating that cake. But on the other side, you have something whispering in your head, and that is your rational brain. So your impulsive brain tells you eat it. But then you have your rational brain telling you, wait, don't listen to that other guy, the rational brain. Because I know it looks tempting. But if you eat it, you're going to get sick. And then you may die. And then this and that. So your rational brain tells you don't eat it. But your brain tells you eat it. So there's this war between your rational brain and your impulsive brain. This is what we call in Islam jihadun nafs. Jihadun nafs is what? Where you have two different opposing elements inside you, each one dragging you a different way. This is where you have to show your willpower. Are you able to say no to your impulsive brain and your desires and say, I'm going to do what's right for my health? This is what grants your success. Take the same concept and apply it to religion. Apply it to halal and haram. Apply it to the dunya. And this dunya, brothers and sisters, we are many times tempted and faced with something that is haram. Once again, we have the impulsive brain. What do our desires tell us? My desire tells me go after it. Do it. Indulge in the dunya. Why? Because your desires, they want instant gratification. Instant pleasure. Pleasure will come out of this. Does your impulsive brain, do your desires think about consequences? No. Why? Because it's impulsive. It's not rational. It just says do it because there is pleasure. What happens after that? Doesn't care. It's not even thinking about that. So from one side, you're being dragged towards this haram. But from the other side, you have what? You have your rational brain, al-aql. You have al-nafs al-lawama. You have your conscious, the fitrah. All these elements that are telling you, stop. I know it's tempting. I know there is pleasure, but it's not worth it. Why? because you will be held accountable. You will be punished. This dunya is not worth it. So wait, and then Allah Azza wa Jal will reward you in the next life. So you see the struggle, the inner struggle within us, where your desires pull you towards a way and your aql pulls you towards a different way. This is where you need to practice and exercise strong will. If your will is strong, you will say no to the desire. But if your will is weak, khalas, you'll give in. And that's why many times people who sin, they're not evil people. No. It's people who have a weak willpower. They just can't say no. When they are tempted with food, when anything, even when it comes to matters that have nothing to do with religion, like I said, with health. Even sometimes in their business, they become lazy, they don't do what's right. That's why you find they lose money. This is the summary of our struggle in this life, brothers and sisters. Between our desires from one side and from the other side, you have the aql. So it's a struggle. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam narrates this hadith. He says that one day during the time of the Prophet, a group of the Muslims were sent for a battle. They went, they fought, they were victorious, they came back. When they came back, Rasulullah told them that you have succeeded in the small jihad, al-jihad al-asghar. And now you have al-jihad al-akbar, the great struggle. So the companions told him, Ya Rasulullah, what do you mean small jihad? We put our lives on the line, is that small? He said, yes. That's the easy war, the easy battle. The more difficult one is the one that is within. Why? Because when you go and fight with Rasulullah, there's no way you can lose. Can you lose that battle? No, because think about it. Either you will kill the enemy, you win. Or the enemy kills you, you're a shaheed. You go straight to paradise. So how can you lose that battle? So it's a jihad al-asghar, it's easy. But this jihad, the internal jihad, you can lose. And if you lose, you become a slave of your nafs and of the dunya and of the shaitan. And this is when you lose your akhirah and everything. So that's why this is al-jihad al-akbar. That's why it's narrated that the hadith of the Prophet says, أَعْدَى عَدُوِّكْ نَفْسُكَ الَّتِي بَيْنَ جَنْبَيْكَ. The greatest enemy you have in life is not that enemy, the disbeliever who wants to kill you. No, because he cannot defeat you. Even if he kills you, he sends you to paradise. So you can never lose. He says, according to the hadith, أَعْدَى عَدُوِّكَ نَفْسُكَ الَّتِي بَيْنَ جَنْبَيْكَ. This nafs inside you. This is your greatest enemy, your desires, your fetishes, your temptations. Because this can make you a slave of the dunya and forget about Allah Azza wa Jal. While the disbeliever, he only strengthens your belief in Allah. So that's why the Prophet told them, now you have the jihadul akbar, the constant war between what's right, doing what's right, and doing what's wrong. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam summarizes this struggle in a beautiful hadith. He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created three types of creations. Number one, He created angels. And the Imam says angels, they are aql without shahwa, just pure intellect, and there's no desire. That's why they never sin. Why? Because there's nothing that is tempting them, that is pushing them to sin. There's no desire. And then he says, and Allah created on the other spectrum, animals. Animals, they have desires but no intellect. That's why they don't understand the difference between right and wrong. And then the Imam says Allah then created a third creation that is a mix of these two. Aqlun wa shahwa. And that is the human being. We have intellect and we have desires. The Imam then says, فَمَنْ غَلَبَ عَقْلُهُ شَهْوَةً كَانَ أَفْضَلُ مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. If you are able through jihadun nafs to control your nafs and desires, if you're able to listen to your intellect and allow your intellect to lead you and control you over your desires, then you will become greater than angels. Why? Because angels have no test, there's no challenge. They just have an intellect, there's no difficulty. While you had difficulties and yet you were able to follow your intellect. So you can become, as a human being, greater than an angel. But then, the Imam says, but فَمَنْ وَمَنْ غَلَبَتْ شَهْوَتُهُ عَقْلَهُ. But if your desires are stronger than your intellect, they defeat your intellect, and you start chasing after your desires like an animal, you go lower, you become lower than an animal. Because an animal, when you see it chasing after its food and desire, it doesn't know any better. It has no intellect. You had an intellect, yet you lived like an animal. You see, sometimes when you go, subhanallah, in some of the Western countries, go on a Friday, Saturday night, some areas at night, and you find people turning into animals. People who just a few hours ago, they were sane, intellectual, engineers, doctors, lawyers, businessmen, very respectful. See what happens to them when they get drunk on Friday, Saturday night. They become worse than animals. Why? Because when someone drinks alcohol, what are they doing? That directly destroys your intellect. That directly impairs your intellect. Khalas ba'd, your intellect becomes weak, so it's all shahwa. It's all desire. That's why many of them, they act so foolish and they commit crimes, they commit things that they regret later because your aql, intellect, is not there. So this is basically, to summarize, this is the struggle of our lives in this dunya. This constant battle between desires and our aql. The one that has a strong willpower can say no to the desires. This person can ultimately develop taqwa, piety. But if I don't have piety, even if I don't have strong willpower, even if I have a good heart, even if I'm a good person, at the end of the day I'll keep on failing. Because every challenge that comes to me, khalas, I'll fail. That's why you see Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, he alludes to this fact in Dua bi Hamza al-Thamali. He says, إلهي ما عصيتك حين عصيتك وأنا بربوبيتك جاحد ولا لوعيدك متعرض. He says, when I disobeyed you, Ya Allah, when I committed a sin, I didn't mean any offense. I didn't mean to disobey you. What does he say? He says, until he reaches this part, وَغَلَبَتْ عَلَيَّ شَهْوَتِي. He says, my shahwa, my desires were too strong. I couldn't say no. My willpower was too weak, and that's why I fell in haram. So just having a good heart, being a good person is not enough. You have to have a strong willpower. And when you look at people, you find people come in all different types when it comes to willpower. You see some people who have a willpower made of iron. Alas, when they decide something, the mountains will not move them. The mountains will not shake them. And then you find other people who just don't have that willpower in every part of life. Very weak. So is it fair that Allah Azza wa Jal creates some people with strong willpower and they will be more powerful, more able, easier for them to say no to the haram versus others who have a weak willpower? Yes, it is fair. Why? Because even if, let's assume that I find myself having weak willpower, I can't say no to anything, you still have a chance. Because scientists state that your willpower, al-irada, al-azm, we call it in Arabic, is not set in stone. You know, for example, your intelligence usually, your intelligence, ba'd khalas, you're born with this amount of intelligence, you can't really gain more intelligence. Yes, you can gain knowledge, facts, but really your intelligence is capped by. This is how much Allah Azza wa Jal gave you. For example, many people, their leadership skills. Many people, these leadership skills, khalas, they're godly given. But however, at the same time, there are some qualities within us that we can what? That we can work on, that we can develop, make them stronger. Amongst those qualities, scientists say, is willpower. Willpower, they say, is just like a muscle. Not everyone who you see has a strong willpower was born that way. Some yes, others no. They had to train themselves. They had to exercise. Just like when you see someone who's very fit, right? Someone with a six-pack, all muscles. Was that person born with those muscles? You say, oh, he's so lucky. I'm sure his father had a six-pack, so he was born with it. No. He got that through what? Through all those hours of pain in the gym. No pain, no gain. So your muscles can always be what? Strengthened through exercise and training. The same thing applies to your willpower. If you have weak willpower, there are ways in which you can strengthen it. There are ways in which you can make it stronger, and then you will be able to what? You'll be able to say no. You'll be able to develop that taqwa. So I shouldn't lose hope just because I don't have strong willpower. Now, having said that, brothers and sisters, the Quran, let's go back to the Quran. The Quran tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mandated fasting so that we can achieve taqwa. And taqwa means what? We said it relies on what? Strong willpower. Say no to haram. There is a sahra, a ga'da, a diwaniya, haram is happening there, but my friends pressure me. Yalla, come, it's okay. It's not easy to say no, right? It's difficult. You need strong willpower. You are faced with haram, you need strong willpower. To when you see someone from the opposite gender, and then there is that lust, that shahwa. Or for example, now it's all through this. And even if you don't go after it, remember we says now it comes after you because of the ads. Sometimes you turn on an Islamic video and you see the ad is all haram. That requires what? Strong willpower to look away. صحيح. وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنَّ. Tell the believers, men and women, to lower their gaze. Lowering your gaze is not easy. It requires very, very strong willpower. Because your desire wants, your nafs wants to look, but you tell your nafs, no, there's Allah, there's an akhirah. You know it's not worth it. So the month of Ramadan, the Quran says, fasting, it cultivates and it teaches you taqwa. And taqwa relies on strong willpower. Now how does fasting help us in strengthening our willpower? Because remember we said some of us have weak willpower. We want to strengthen it. How? Do you go to the gym? No. The Quran says fast. If you feel that you have a weak willpower, fasting is an excellent way for you to strengthen and sharpen that willpower. Let me say how. It's very obvious, brothers and sisters. The way that it works is that, just think about it. What are we doing in the month of Ramadan? For 14 hours, let's say, from Fajr until Maghrib, we are abstaining from 10 things that we usually, most of them, so not all of them, most of them, we do them on a daily basis. We eat, we drink on a daily basis, right? For those individuals that smoke, they can't smoke any longer in the month of Ramadan. And some other things that we may be accustomed to doing in the non-month of Ramadan. But in the month of Ramadan, we say no. You say no to your desire. Why? Why do we not eat and drink during the day? You know, some people, fasting is so difficult because they are addicted to coffee, for example. They have to have that morning coffee. For 30 days, all of a sudden, no coffee. You know how much willpower that requires? But in Ramadan, because everybody's doing it and because it's for Allah, we all do it. It becomes easier. For 30 days, no coffee. At least when I wake up, so you can have coffee at night. No smoking for 14 hours. So if you were able to say no to your desires that are essentially halal, coffee is halal, for 14 hours, for 30 days, when the month of Ramadan finishes, you have trained and exercised your willpower to say no, and it will be much easier for you to say no after Ramadan. You will say, Ana in Ramadan, I stayed away from all foods. After Ramadan, it will be much easier for me to stay away from haram foods. In Ramadan, I stayed away from water. After Ramadan, it's much easier for me to stay away from drinking some haram things. In Ramadan, I was able to stay away from my daily coffee. That's why if I have haram addictions, right? Some people now, they have haram addictions on their tablets, on their smartphones, whether it is texting, or whether it is, seeing some haram thing, sometimes it becomes an addiction. So the month of Ramadan is a way in which for you to pull out and put a pause to those addictions. Ultimately, when you fast, what have you achieved? Okay, I didn't eat and drink for 14 hours. Yes, some people, maybe it's for health reasons, but that's not why we fast. Well, if it was for health reasons, we do that the whole year. Why month of Ramadan? Month of Ramadan, brothers and sisters, it teaches you to strengthen that willpower. So that after Ramadan, you can easily say no to your desires. But unfortunately, look at what's happened. Many people, how do they treat the month of Ramadan? They treat it just like a chore, a ritual. 30 days I fast, and I know many people who become religious in the month of Ramadan. They will not listen to haram music, they will not drink, they'll start praying, they won't do this, they won't do that, correct? But what happens on the day of Eid, the day after Eid? They go right back to the haram. Why? Why is that? Because they don't understand what Ramadan means. Ramadan isn't a 1 month thing. Ramadan is a training course for you to what? To learn taqwa for 11 months. And then after 11 months, your taqwa once again, because remember, this is a muscle. Muscles have to always be they have to always be trained and always exercise. If you don't exercise for a couple of months, you start to lose your muscles. After 11 months, you're losing that spiritual energy. Once again, Ramadan comes and it refreshes you. And it gives you another boost of willpower. But if you're treating Ramadan like a one-time thing, 1 month I become holy, and then the day of Eid, khalas, I go back to, what have you learned? That's like you go and you take a 1 month training session, and then you leave the training, you haven't learned anything. You wasted your month. That's why the Prophet says in one hadith, or Imam Ali, كم من صائم ليس له من صيامه إلا الجوع والظمأ. How many people fast, but all they achieve that Maghrib is what? 2 things. Hunger and thirst. Congratulations. Okay, what is the point of just making yourself hungry and thirsty? That is a means. Use hunger and thirst to cultivate taqwa. Because now I'm able to what? To say no to my nafs. I have strengthened my willpower. Use that. Don't just bury it after 1 month. But the fact that many of us go back to the haram, go back to the dunya after the month of Ramadan, has shown us that we don't even know why we're fasting. We're like zombies. We're just going with the flow. It's a good thing. You fast. Allah wants it. But why? What's the philosophy? What's the point of fasting? Fast so that after Ramadan on the day of Eid, you will have the willpower to say no. When your nafs tells you do that haram, when the shaitan whispers and says go after the dunya, at least now your willpower is stronger than it was before Ramadan. You may still commit the haram, but it will be easier for you to say no to the haram because you have trained yourselves. You have strengthened your willpower. This is what Ramadan is all about. It's not about 1 month being holy and then going back. Learn nothing. Wasted an entire month. And that's why, brothers and sisters, if you see the hadith of Ahlul Bayt, there's something very interesting. When you go to the Islamic calendars now, what is the first month of the year? Muharram, صح? But there are a few traditions, numerous traditions from the Ahlul Bayt that tell us the first month for the believers, the first month is not Muharram. What is the first month? The month of Ramadan. I can probably bring you 5 or 6 hadiths from the Imams. أول شهر عند أهل الحق. The first month for a believer, the first month of the spiritual year, right? That doesn't mean we have to change our calendars. No, your spiritual year. You know how some companies have their fiscal year, or you have your school year. Yeah, it's all different. Or your khums day. When does your khums year begin? Your spiritual year begins Ramadan 1. Why? Because you begin your year by strengthening your willpower. 11 months after that, you have that willpower to say no to the haram. That's why in the hadith, I think it's Imam al-Radha, he says the day of Eid, one reason why we celebrate is because it's the first day out of the year that we're able to eat during the day. How is the day of Eid the first day out of the year that you're able to eat during the day? Because the year began with Ramadan 1, you can't eat. Ramadan 2, until Ramadan, the end of Ramadan, there was not a single day that you could eat. Now is the first day that I can eat. And that's why he says this is one factor, of course, many things. This is one factor that makes it a special day. So, going back to the point, taqwa, brothers and sisters, we mentioned, is the most important goal that every single one of us should be looking for in life. If you can take one thing with you to the akhirah, as the Quran says, وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. And Amir al-Mu'mineen's hadith that we began with, he asked the people in the graves, what is the greatest thing to take to the graves? He said if they could answer, they would all tell you, إِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. Take taqwa, piety with you. So the question is, if this is the most important goal in my life to take to my akhirah, how do I achieve taqwa? Allah says in the Holy Quran, I have prescribed fasting upon you, not to torture you, not so that you starve, not so that you, for 30 days you go through trouble. No! This is a training session, exercise, so that you can develop the ability to say no to haram. Look at Amir al-Mu'mineen. Any angle you look at taqwa, from any side, any perspective, you see Amir al-Mu'mineen on the forefront. You see Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam is a beautiful example. Look at the taqwa of Amir al-Mu'mineen through having strong willpower. In a beautiful sermon in Nahj al-Balagha, I'll read you what Imam Ali alayhi salam says. This is sermon 45, a letter that he sent to Uthman ibn Hunayf al-Ansari, and he was the governor of Amir al-Mu'mineen in Basra. So the Imam mentions many things until he says, because he was criticizing and upset with Uthman ibn Hunayf that he had went, he's a governor, he had attended a very, very lavish dinner. All types of foods. And Imam Ali alayhi salam did not like that. Why? Because he wanted himself and his governors to live a humble life. So they are a role model for even the poor individuals. Don't just live with the rich. Because once you spend time with the rich and the wealthy, you tend to forget about the other citizens. You tend to forget about the weak, the poor, the sidelined, and people that don't have a voice. So then Imam Ali alayhi salam tells him, oh Uthman, you don't think I can live a life like you? Like what you did? Now Uthman ibn Hunayf was a good man, let's just say he committed a mistake. The Imam tells him, I could live like a king, I'm the Khalifa, what's to prevent me? Listen to what Imam Ali says. وَلَوْ شِئْتُ لَاهْتَدَيْتُ الطَّرِيقَ إِلَى مُصَفَّى هَذَا الْعَسَلِ وَلُبَابِ هَذَا الْقَمْحِ وَنَسَائِجِ هَذَا الْقَسْ. He says, if I wanted, I could have lived like a king. Honey, the Imam says, and the best fabrics and the best foods. He's just giving examples. If I wanted, I could have lived that lifestyle. But the Imam then says, لكن هيهات هيهات, never. أن يغلبني هواي, that I will let my hawa, my desire to take over my intellect. Never will I let my desire control me. Never will I give my matters in the hands of my desires. ويقودني جشعي إلى تخير الأطعمة, and I allow my jasha. Jasha is that greed that we have for the dunya. I will never allow my greed of the nafs to eating different types of foods. I don't want that. And then he gives a reasoning, one reasoning behind that. He says, وَلَعَلَّ بِالْحِجَازِ أَوْ الْيَمَامَ مَنْ لَا طَمَعَ لَهُ فِي الْقُرْصِ وَلَا عَهْدَ لَهُ بِالشَّبَعِ. He says, and maybe, subhanAllah, he doesn't say for sure. He says, and maybe in Hijaz, in Yamama, different parts of my kingdom, there are citizens that do not have access to food. And I go and I eat different types of food. I will never do that. And then the Imam, he says, أَقْنَعُ مِن نَفْسِي أَنْ يُقَالَ أَمِيرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَا أُشَارِكُهُمْ فِي مَكَارِهِ الدَّارِ أَوْ أَكُونَ أُسْوَةً لَهُمْ فِي جُشُوبَةِ الْعَيْشِ He says, how can I accept that people call me Amirul Mu'mineen? I am the Amir, the prince, the commander of the Mu'mineen believers, of the faithful. And I do not live their hardships. I do not know what it feels like to be poor, to not have food. No, I have to live like them. Because no matter how many reports the president or the king or the Amir, whoever it is, receives about the citizens that are not receiving their rights or the citizens that are marginalized, receiving a report is nothing like you yourself feeling what they go through. Remember empathy? We said that's one of the benefits of the month of Ramadan. Allah wants us to feel hunger so that we start empathizing and sympathizing with the poor, with those that don't have food. So Imam Ali alayhi salam says, I have to go through what they are going through. First of all, so I can empathize better. Second of all, when those people that have difficulties in life, when they see Amirul Mu'mineen is living like them, you know how much that will make it easier upon them? When you see your own Imam, you say, I have financial problems, I cannot afford meat, I cannot afford this. I see my Imam is living that humble lifestyle, but khalas. If the Imam, the king, the Khalifa is living such a humble lifestyle, khalas, it makes it much easier for me to follow in his footsteps. And then listen to these words of Imam Ali alayhi salam, truly remarkable. He says, فَمَا خُلِقْتُ لِيَجْغَلَنِي أَكْلُ الطَّيِّبَاتِ كَالْبَهِيمَةِ الْبَرْبُوطَ هَمُّهَا عَلَفُهَا. He says, Allah Azza wa Jal has created me with dignity. I'm a human being. I have aql. I was not created so that I just go after food and desires, just like an animal. What does an animal care about? If you watch documentaries about animals, or if you go to the zoo, the most important thing for the animal is to what? To eat. To go and find food. That's its goal. Every day it wakes up, wants to eat. Once it eats, khalas. It has achieved its goal for that day. He says, I, Amir al-Mu'mineen, a human being that Allah has given me aql. That is my goal. Just to enjoy my life. Just to have fun. Just to eat. Then how will that make me different than an animal? And unfortunately, brothers and sisters, there are some people that live like animals. They don't realize it. Because their goals are all materialistic. They don't have any spiritual goals. They don't have any goals that go beyond materialism. Just what? Eat, be comfortable, travel, have fun. Besides that, what's your higher goal? Even if people who don't even have anything to do with religion. At the end of the day, even if you're not religious, there are some virtues that are universal. What is your goal? What do you live for? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I'm not going to live like an animal. Because I'm a human being. Allah has given me intellect and I can do much better than that. See the strong will of Imam Ali alayhi salam. There's a story that Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais, one of the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, narrates. He says, after Imam Ali died, Muawiyah became the official Khalifa. He says, Muawiyah asked me to come and visit him in Sham, in his palace. He says, I went. It was time for dinner. He says, Muawiyah told me, Yalla, Bismillah, let's go into the dinner room and let's eat. He says, I went. I saw a sufra that has a beginning but no end. Every type of food, he says, I can imagine. And some foods, Aslan, I didn't even know what they are. I had never seen them. Because remember, especially back then, you didn't have all the different types of foods in one area. There wasn't that efficient type of transportation. Plus, most people weren't wealthy. This is a Khalifa, but you can afford everything. He says, I began to look at all the different foods. Not 3, 4, maybe 50 types of foods. He says, one of the foods caught my attention. It looked very nice. So I told Muawiyah, what is this one? Sometimes I got also invited to some people's houses. I don't know what they put in front of me. Well, what is this? I've never seen this. They tell you this is, an exotic food. This is something that people eat in, China or Africa or in Brazil or something like that. Muawiyah says, oh, this is my favorite dish. This is my signature dish. What is it? He tells him, this is stuffed duck. There's an exact hadith that is narrated. from Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais. This is what he said. He said, مصارين البط محشوة بالمخ قد قلي بدهن الفستق وذر عليك السكر. Allahu Akbar. Duck that is stuffed, it's stuffed with other types of food, and it has sugar. And it has been grilled or it has been baked with pistachio oil and then sugar on top of it. Al-Ahnaf says, my jaw dropped. What the heck is this food? Aslan, me, brothers and sisters, today, 2023, wallahi, I haven't eaten something like that. Maybe some of you have, but we don't want to judge each other. But I have never had such a meal. Duck that has been stuffed with, it's mahshua bil mukh, the brain or whatever, some parts of the duck, and it's cooked with pistachio oil. So Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais all of a sudden began to cry. He's looking at all these foods. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. When you go to Muawiyah, you will see foods that you will never see anywhere else. That's why they say it's attributed to one of those companions who used to say, when it's time to eat, I go and eat with Muawiyah. When it's time to pray, I go to pray behind Ali. Because each one perfects one part of of his life. Food with Muawiyah is much better. Salah behind Ali is much better. And he says, when it's time for war, I stand on the side and I watch, because this is the safest place. So Al-Ahnaf began to cry. Muawiyah told him, why are you crying? You should be laughing. You should be having the moment of your life. I usually read in the news some people who are on death row. They're supposed to execute them, like in America. They give them one last wish before they are executed. What do you want? Many times you'll find they ask for a very expensive meal. I want to have, what's that called? The Japanese Wagyu steak. One piece is $100, $200. They want to eat that and die after. So Al-Ahnaf has this beautiful opportunity and he's not on death row. But he begins to cry. Wow, he says, what's going on? He tells him, I remembered my Mawla Amir al-Mu'mineen. How his food was when he was the Khalifa. And how your food is. And I couldn't help but cry and remember how great Ali was. We truly did not appreciate the greatness of Ali ibn Abi Talib. He tells Muawiyah, let me tell you a story. One day I visited Imam Ali while the Imam was fasting. So was it the month of Ramadan or was it recommended fasting? He says, I was visiting him. He was the Khalifa. He says, I wanted to leave. He told me, stay for iftar. Let's have iftar together. So I said, apparently he said, having food with the Khalifa, you can imagine it's a very good meal that you're going to have. So he says, all of a sudden, I see they put the sufra and they bring a clay jar. A clay jar! And then the Imam says, Yallah, Bismillah. What do you mean, Bismillah? What is this? Imagine I invite you over for iftar and I put a clay jar. And I say, Bismillah. So you'll probably say, of course, this is the first course. Now we have sometimes 5-course meals. I've seen 8-course meals. Imam Ali had a 1-course meal. So he's like, I was embarrassed. What am I going to say? He's the Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, so the Amir took the clay jar and it was sealed. He wanted to open it, he couldn't open it. He was struggling. It was locked so tightly that the Imam struggled to open it. This is Amir al-Mu'mineen, Fatih Bab Khaybar. So I told him, Ya Ali, what is this? Why have you closed the jar so hard? Is there jewels in it? The Imam said, no, there's no jewels. The Imam opened it, he showed me. He says, I saw in it was Ut al-Sha'ir. You know what Ut al-Sha'ir is? Sha'ir is barley. There is bread that is made out of barley, and there is bread that is made out of wheat. Usually, bread that is made out of wheat tastes better than bread that is made out of barley, but the one made out of barley is more healthy. It's like the full grains, the whole grains. It's, they're more healthy, but they don't taste as good as the white bread. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, he opened it, and it wasn't even barley bread. It was the raw barley seeds. You know, just go on Google, type raw barley seeds. Aslan, it looks like food for animals. You know how you throw food for birds? He says, I saw it's the raw barley seeds. The Imam wants to just eat that. He said, Allahu Akbar. Amir al-Mu'mineen, this is your meal? You're going to eat raw barley seeds? He said, yes, this is my iftar. I told him, why do you lock it so tightly? He said, because I am afraid my sons, Hassan and Hussein, will come before iftar. They will open it and they will add some oil to it to soften it, because it's a bit hard. Because they wanted their father to have, a better meal. So just add some oil so that it becomes, how we put the maraq on the bread and it becomes easier to eat. He says, so I lock it tightly so Hassan and Hussein cannot go and open it. Because when Imam Ali closes something, only he can open it, no one else. So Al-Ahnaf is surprised. He says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, is that haram for you to eat oil? Make it a little tastier, softer? He says, no, it's not haram. But I'm Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And I have so many people that look up to me. I'm their role model. And they may be suffering. And maybe they don't have access to those good foods. So thus I live this life. Khalas, I've taught myself, he says, that this life is the life that I'm going to accept. And don't think Imam Ali was always in pain. Sometimes when you're dieting, you just want to commit suicide at the end. Because it's torture. You can't eat anything. You have to exercise. It's torture. Imam Ali was not being tortured. He loved every minute of it. So the Imam said this. So he says it's not haram, ولكن يجب على أئمة الحق أن يعدوا أنفسهم من ضعفاء الناس. The Imams, the leaders, they have to always live like the lowest, the weakest. Why? لكي لا يطغى الفقير فقره. So that the poverty does not overtake the poor. And خلاص بعد, they say we can't have it anymore. We can't take this anymore. So Al-Ahnaf, remember going back to the story of Al-Ahnaf? He says, I told the story to Muawiyah. He says, even Muawiyah, he says, he was affected, he was touched. He said, لَقَدْ ذَكَرْتَ فَضْلَ مَنْ لَا يُنْكَرُ فَضْلًا. With all the disagreements I have with Ali, but I cannot deny that Ali ibn Abi Talib was someone that had strong willpower. Someone that had willpower, that had taqwa. Someone that had patience. Someone that easily said no to the dunya. Remember last night, Ya dunya, ghurri ghayri. Oh dunya, don't think that you can fool Ali. Don't think that you can attract Ali ibn. Don't think that you pose a challenge. Just like you and I, when we are posed and face haram, we have to practice jihad in nafs. And sometimes we fail, sometimes we succeed. Imam Ali says, your temptations of the dunya, Aslan, they don't even pose a threat. It's not even a challenge. It's like you see, for example, some food that's haram, but it's dirty, it's on the floor. Are you going to have a desire to eat that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is how Imam Ali alayhi salam would see the dunya. So by strengthening our desire, by strengthening our willpower, al-azm, irada, you will strengthen your taqwa in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because it will be much easier for you. And when you fast, brothers and sisters, remember this. That I am fasting, no to water, no to food, no to this, no to that. This is all an exercise. So that I can learn the art of what? Abstaining. I can make my willpower stronger. It'll be easier for me to say no when it comes to haram after the month of Ramadan. So this is the first element that taqwa incorporates. Willpower. And this is how fasting will help you in making your willpower stronger. Tomorrow, inshallah, I'll speak about the second virtue. The second element that taqwa requires and how fasting helps us in developing and cultivating the second one. Now before I end, one quick line. One of the scholars, and that is Al-Imam al-Khomeini, has a book, Al-Arba'un al-Haditha. He narrates from his teachers, one of his teachers, he says that one sin, listen carefully, one sin that weakens your willpower, that makes you vulnerable in front of your desires and nafs and in front of the shaitan, he says is listening to haram music. Listening to haram music is something, some people ask, what's the harm of this music? What is it doing? No, it is doing things that you don't feel. You don't always have to see it and realize it. There's many things that are bad for us, but we don't feel it, right? Like the ultraviolet rays. Do we feel it? We don't feel it. Radiation. Do we feel it? We don't feel it. But the damage is being done without you seeing it. Listening to music, he says, will weaken your willpower. You'll find it difficult to pray. You'll find it difficult to recite dua. You'll find it difficult to say no to the haram. So this is something that we have to also keep in mind. Inshallah, we will continue the series tomorrow.